The mansion was unusually lively that evening, filled with the soft hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses. As the Millionaire's guests wandered from room to room, the staff moved quietly along the edges of the gathering, carrying trays, adjusting lights, and keeping the mansion running smoothly without being seen. Among them was Elena, a calm and gentle housemaid who had worked in the mansion for only a year. She did her job with quiet dedication, never seeking attention, and most guests never even noticed her. That night, she was busy dusting the large hallway mirror when she heard laughter rising from the main hall. The millionaire, Mr. Alistair Grant, was entertaining a group of his influential friends. He liked to show off his home, its rare art, its tall ceilings, and especially the beautiful grand piano that stood in the center of the hall. But the piano had not been played in years. It sat like a decoration, impressive but silent. One of the guests joked about it. "You have this incredible piano, Alistair, but I've never heard anyone play it. Does anyone here even know how?" More laughter followed, and Mr. Grant shrugged playfully. "Well, I certainly don't, and I doubt anyone in this room has touched a piano in years." Another guest teased, "What about your staff? Maybe one of them can give us a performance." This made everyone turn their heads toward the nearest housemaid, Elena. She froze for a moment, unsure why they were staring at her. She had been hoping to stay invisible, just doing her work and slipping away without drawing attention. Grant smirked, then lifted his hand and pointed casually in her direction. "Elena, isn't it? Why don't you come here for a moment?" His voice wasn't unkind, but it carried the tone of someone who was used to giving orders and having them followed without question. Elena immediately lowered her eyes and walked carefully toward him. "Yes, sir?" she asked softly. The guests watched her with amused smiles, expecting something entertaining to happen, something harmless, maybe even silly. Grant leaned back in his chair, tapping his finger on the armrest. "We were just wondering," he said, "if you can play the piano. Would you try for us?" A few guests chuckled under their breath. They assumed she would panic or politely refuse. No one truly expected her to play anything meaningful. To them, it was simply a light-hearted moment, something to laugh about. Elena felt her throat tighten. Her hands trembled slightly, not because she didn't know how to play but because she did. The piano was not a stranger to her. Its keys, its sound, its feel, she knew them deeply. But that part of her life was hidden, locked away because it belonged to a world she no longer lived in. She stood quietly, unsure what to say. Grant raised an eyebrow. "It's just a question, nothing serious. Go ahead, play anything you know." Elena's first instinct was to shake her head and retreat. She wanted to tell him she didn't play anymore, that she wasn't comfortable performing in front of strangers. But she also knew refusing a direct request from the master of the house would only create trouble. She didn't want to seem rude or difficult. So she nodded gently. "If you'd like me to try, sir." There was a small ripple of laughter among the guests, but it wasn't cruel, just light and amused. They assumed she would tap a few random notes and they'd all move on. Elena walked toward the piano with slow, careful steps. Her heart was thudding hard in her chest. She had not touched an instrument in years, not since her life had taken a turn she never expected. Back then, music was everything to her. She spent countless hours practicing, learning, dreaming. But dreams don't always survive real life. When her family fell into financial trouble, she had no choice but to leave her training behind and look for work. Now she cleaned floors, polished furniture, and kept her past to herself. As she approached the piano, the room grew a little quieter. Maybe the guests were curious. Maybe they simply wanted to see what would happen. Elena pulled out the bench gently, afraid it might squeak and embarrass her further. She sat down and stared at the keys. They were smooth, shining under the warm lights. She lifted her hand slightly, hesitated, and lowered it again. Her breathing felt uneven, as though she wasn't sure she deserved to touch the instrument anymore. Behind her, someone whispered, "She looks nervous." "This might be funny," another replied. "It's harmless. Let her try." Elena closed her eyes, blocking out the whispers, the lights, the stairs. She remembered a small practice room from her past, the smell of old sheet music, the gentle voice of the instructor who once told her she had a gift. She remembered playing late into the night when the world felt quiet and hopeful. She didn't know if she could do it again, not here, not in this huge mansion full of strangers waiting for entertainment. Still, she carefully placed her fingers over the keys. For a brief moment, she didn't press anything. She simply felt the piano beneath her fingertips. It felt familiar, like a memory she thought she had lost. Then she pressed a single note. One soft, clear tone floated through the hall. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic, but it was perfect, steady, controlled, and full of surprising confidence. The laughter behind her faded. No one expected that sound from her. Elena opened her eyes slowly. Something inside her loosened. For the first time in years, touching the piano didn't feel painful. It felt like returning home. She pressed another note, then another. A small melody formed, simple but full of feeling. She didn't rush. She didn't try to impress anyone. She let the music come naturally, the way it used to. The guests fell completely silent. Mr. Grant leaned forward slightly, his teasing smile fading, his eyes focused, studying her with a different kind of interest, no longer amusement, but curiosity. Elena kept playing the gentle melody, each note calming her nerves. Her hands moved more confidently now, remembering patterns and rhythms she thought she had forgotten. She didn't try anything complex. She just let her fingers follow the instinct that had slept inside her for so long. The room stayed quiet, the kind of quiet where no one wants to interrupt. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, the melody ended softly, as though it didn't want to disturb the silence that had settled over the hall. She stood up quickly, lowering her head. "I hope that was all right, sir," she whispered. For the first time that evening, no one laughed, no one joked. The guests looked at one another with surprise, as if they had witnessed something they didn't expect. Grant didn't say anything at first. He simply stared at her with a thoughtful expression, as though trying to understand how his quiet housemaid had produced something so gentle and beautiful. Elena stepped back, ready to disappear into her usual corner and return to her work. She didn't want attention. She didn't want questions. She only wanted to blend back into the background. But something had changed in the room. Something about that simple melody had shifted the air. And though she didn't know it yet, this small moment, this small command she had obeyed was about to change her life in ways she never imagined. Elena walked away from the piano with her head down, hoping to escape the attention that had suddenly fallen on her. She wished the moment would fade quickly, that the guests would return to their conversations and forget she had played at all. But she could feel their eyes following her as she carefully stepped back toward the edge of the hall. She picked up her cleaning cloth again, pretending to be busy, though her hands were still shaking slightly from the unexpected performance. She wasn't shaking because she had played badly. She was shaking because she had allowed a part of herself to resurface, something she had kept hidden for so long that it felt strange to let it breathe again. Behind her, the guests continued whispering softly. Their voices were no longer filled with amusement, but with curiosity. They wondered who she really was, why she could play like that, and how someone working as a housemaid had such delicate skill. Merv Grant stood up slowly, watching Elena with a new expression. It wasn't arrogance anymore, nor casual interest. It was something more thoughtful. He wasn't the type of man who usually paid attention to the personal stories of his staff, but now he found himself wanting to understand her. Elena tried not to look in his direction, but she could feel him approaching. She continued wiping the same small corner of the mirror even though it was already spotless. "Elena," he said in a quieter voice than before. She turned around carefully. "Yes, sir." He studied her for a moment, as if searching for the right question. "That was unexpected," he said. "You play well." Her cheeks warmed slightly. She lowered her gaze to the floor. "Thank you, sir. I just played something simple." "It didn't sound simple," one of the guests added from behind him. "It was lovely. You have a good touch." Elena forced a small smile, unsure what else to say. She wasn't used to receiving attention, especially not from wealthy strangers dressed in expensive suits and dresses. Mr. Grant took a step closer. "Where did you learn to play?" he asked. The question tightened something inside her chest. It wasn't a painful memory, but it was a sensitive one, something she didn't casually share. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I learned when I was younger," she said softly. "I used to take lessons." "Lessons?" Mr. Grant repeated. "Proper training." She nodded. "For a while, yes." Another guest joined in. "So why did you stop?" Elena's fingers tightened around the cloth she was holding. She didn't want to tell her life story in front of strangers. Some memories were still heavy, even if time had softened them. Mr. Grant must have sensed her discomfort. He lifted his hand slightly, signaling the others to hold off on their questions. "That's enough," he said calmly. "She doesn't need to explain anything right now." Elena felt a small wave of relief, though she still wished she could disappear for a moment. The guests slowly returned to their seats and conversations, But the atmosphere had changed. Their laughter was softer now, their glances toward Elena more respectful. It was as though the simple melody she played had touched something quietly within them. Elena returned to her usual tasks, keeping her movements quiet and controlled. She dusted the shelves, adjusted the table decorations, and helped bring out refreshments when the kitchen staff signaled her. Everything felt normal again on the surface, but inside, she felt different. Something had been stirred awake. While carrying a tray toward the dining area, she found her thoughts drifting to the past, the years she spent practicing, the small competitions she joined, the long afternoons spent learning new pieces. She remembered her mother sitting beside her during practice, encouraging her gently. She remembered her father working late shifts to help pay for her lessons. But she also remembered the turning point, the day everything changed. She was 17 when her father fell seriously ill. Her family needed money for treatment, and she had to make a choice. She could continue studying music, chasing dreams that offered no guarantee, or she could leave her training and find work to help her family. The choice was painful, but she didn't hesitate. Family came first, always. She stopped her lessons, packed her belongings, and started working wherever she could, cleaning houses, serving tea, helping in small shops, anything that offered steady income. The piano slipped out of her life slowly, like a friend she missed but couldn't afford to visit. Now, years later, the grand piano had brought those memories back, and she didn't know whether to feel grateful or frightened. As she placed the tray on the table, one of the younger guests approached her with a warm smile. "Excuse me," she said gently. "I just wanted to say your playing was truly lovely. I didn't expect it, and it really touched me." Elena smiled politely. "Thank you. You're very kind." The guest nodded. "Do you still play often?" Elena shook her head. "No, I haven't played in many years." "That's a shame," the woman replied softly. "You have something special." Elena didn't know how to respond, so she simply thanked her again and moved on. Throughout the evening, small moments like that repeated. Guests approached her between conversations, offering kind comments, asking gentle questions, or simply giving her warm looks. None of it felt mocking anymore. They treated her as though they had seen a different side of her, a side she never meant to reveal. Later in the night, when most of the guests had moved to the dining room, Mr. Grant found her again. This time, he walked with a more serious expression. "Elena," he said quietly, "do you have a moment?" She nodded. "Yes, sir." He led her to a quieter corner of the hall, away from the crowd but still within view of the other staff. Elena stood with her hands folded in front of her, unsure why he wanted to speak privately. He studied her carefully. "I didn't know you had this kind of talent," he said. "Why didn't I know this sooner?" She looked down. "It's not something I talk about, and I didn't think it mattered." "It matters," he replied. "You played beautifully. That's not something you hide." Elena hesitated, then said softly, "I stopped playing a long time ago. Life moved in another direction." Mr. Grant leaned against the wall slightly, folding his arms. "But the way you played, that doesn't come from hobby. That comes from training, from passion. You must have practiced for years." She nodded gently. "I did. But things changed." He didn't push her for the details. Instead, he asked, "Do you miss it?" She didn't answer for a long moment. Her heart felt heavy with the truth she rarely admitted out loud. "Yes," she whispered finally. "I miss it very much." Mr. Grant watched her closely. He wasn't a soft man, not usually. But even he could see the weight of her answer. "You know," he said slowly, "not many people have a gift like that. And when they do, it's a shame to let it fade." Elena didn't know how to respond. She didn't want to seem emotional or dramatic. She simply bowed her head again and said, "I'm grateful for your words, sir." He nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe one day you can play more for us. Not for entertainment, but because you deserve to be heard." Her breath caught slightly. She wasn't expecting that. I don't know," she said softly. "I haven't played properly in so long." He gave a small smile. "Still, what you did tonight was enough to silence an entire room. That means something." Elena felt a strange mixture of pride and fear. Pride because someone had seen her talent. Fear because she didn't know what that might mean for her future. After their conversation, Mr. Grant returned to his guests, but he looked back at her one more time as he walked away. It wasn't a casual glance. It was the look of someone whose curiosity had been awakened. Elena stood quietly in a hallway, staring at the piano from a distance. It looked different now, not just a decoration, but a reminder of a life she thought she had lost. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face that life again. She wasn't sure if she even could. But something inside her whispered gently, maybe this moment wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was the beginning of something she never expected. As the evening went on, she continued her tasks, but a small spark had reignited in her heart, a spark she hadn't felt in years, and though she tried to push it away, tried to convince herself it was only a moment and nothing more, the truth lingered quietly inside her. For the first time in a long time, she felt the memory of hope. Elena woke early the next morning, long before the sun rose above the mansion's tall windows. The events of the previous night felt almost unreal, like a dream she wasn't sure she had actually lived. She walked quietly through the empty hallway, her footsteps soft on the polished floor. The grand piano still stood in the center of the hall, untouched since she had played it. She paused for a moment, staring at it from a distance. The soft light from the chandelier above made the smooth black surface shine gently. It looked peaceful in the early silence, almost inviting, but she didn't dare go near it again. She had done enough for one night. A small melody was all she meant to give, and yet it had stirred up more attention than she had expected. She turned away and headed toward the staff quarters. The other workers were beginning their morning routines, preparing breakfast trays, polishing the silverware, sweeping the entrance steps. They greeted her warmly, more warmly than usual. One of the older maids, who rarely spoke more than a few words at a time, touched her arm lightly. "I heard what happened last night," she said with a proud smile. "You played beautifully." Elena blushed a little. "Thank you. It was just something simple." The older woman shook her head. "Simple or not, you made the whole house quiet. That doesn't happen often around here." Another staff member walked by carrying linens and added, "Everyone is talking about you, even in the kitchen." Elena felt a mix of embarrassment and warmth. She wasn't used to being in the center of attention, not even small attention like this. She quietly returned to her task of arranging fresh flowers in the hallway vases. As she worked, she kept thinking about Mr. Grant's words from the night before. "You deserve to be heard." She didn't know what he meant by that, but the words stayed with her. Later that morning, as the guests began waking up and moving around the house, Elena continued her work silently. She carried fresh towels to the guest rooms, helped prepare the dining area, and ensured everything looked perfect. But everywhere she went, she felt eyes on her, not in a harsh way, but in a curious one. A few of the guests gave her warm smiles as she passed. Some whispered quietly, clearly recognizing her. She felt shy under their attention and tried her best to focus on her tasks. Just before lunchtime, one of the mansion's assistants approached her. "Mr. Grant wants to see you in the study," he said with a polite tone. Elena's heart skipped a beat. "Right now?" "Yes," he said. "It's not urgent, but he would like to speak with you." She nodded, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked toward the study with small, careful steps. The mansion study was a warm room filled with tall bookshelves, dark wood furniture, and large windows that let in soft light. Mr. Grant was seated near the window, reading something on his tablet. He looked up when she entered. "Elena, come in," he said, setting the device aside. She stepped inside and stood respectfully near the doorway. "You asked for me, sir?" He motioned for her to come closer. "Yes, sit if you'd like." She shook her head gently. "I'm all right standing." He nodded, accepting her choice. Then he studied her with a calm seriousness that made her shift slightly. "I wanted to talk about last night," he began. Elena felt her chest tighten. "If I did something wrong, I'm very sorry." "Wrong?" he interrupted softly. "No, quite the opposite." She blinked, uncertain. He continued, "Among all the gatherings I've hosted, I've never seen my guests so quiet. Not once." "You managed that with a few notes." She lowered her eyes. "I didn't mean to cause any attention." "I know," he said. "That's what makes it more impressive." He leaned forward slightly. "Elena, you have a rare gift, and I think you're hiding more than you showed us last night." She stayed silent. Her heart felt heavy and exposed. He spoke gently. "You said you had lessons. You said you trained for a while, but when you played, it wasn't the skill of someone who practiced a little. It sounded like someone who lived through music." Elena took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. She didn't want to talk about her past, but she also knew she had already revealed a piece of it. "I practiced for many years," she admitted softly, "since I was a child, but I stopped a long time ago." "Life changed," he nodded. "Life changes for everyone, but talent like yours doesn't disappear." She looked up at him, unsure what he wanted from her. He spoke again. "Do you know what many of the guests said after you left the room last night?" Elena shook her head. "They said your playing felt emotional, as if you were telling a story." Elena felt her throat tighten. Music always had been her way of expressing things she couldn't put into words. "I want to ask you something," he said, "not as your employer, but as someone who recognizes potential." She waited quietly. "Would you be willing to play again? Not for entertainment, not for the guests, just for yourself, here in the mansion, whenever you feel comfortable." Elena blinked in surprise. She didn't expect that. "I don't want to pressure you," he added quickly, "but I think it would be good for you, and I would like to hear more, only if you want to share it." Elena looked down at her hands. For years she had pushed away the idea of playing again. She told herself it was too late. That music belonged to a past she could never return to. Yet last night, just touching the keys had brought back something she didn't realize she missed so painfully. "I don't know if I can," she said softly. "It's been so long." He nodded patiently. "There's no rush, no expectations, but the piano is always there. If one day you decide to sit at it again, that will be enough." Elena swallowed hard. She didn't know why, but his words touched her deeply. He continued, "If there's anything you need, music sheets, time, space, you can tell me. I'm not asking you to perform for anyone. This is for you." Her eyes softened. No one had offered her something for herself in a very long time. "I'll think about it," she whispered. "That's all I ask," he said with a gentle nod. She bowed her head respectfully and stepped out of the study. The moment she closed the door behind her, she leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. Her heart was full of confusion, fear, hope, and something she hadn't felt in years: possibility. For the rest of the afternoon, she tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to the piano. She would pass by the hall and slow her steps, feeling a strange pull each time. The mansion felt different now. The air felt warmer, somehow more welcoming. By evening, when the guests gathered again for dinner, Elena moved quietly among them, serving drinks and arranging table settings. She noticed a few guests whispering softly and glancing at the piano. One of them caught her eye and smiled kindly. "We hope to hear you again someday," he said. Elena gave a small, polite smile and moved on. Her cheeks warmed. Later in the night, after most guests went to their rooms, the mansion grew quiet again. Elena was finishing her tasks when she walked past the piano one more time. She paused. The room was empty. The lights were dim, and the piano sat alone in the center. As if waiting, she stepped closer, hesitating. Her heart pounded softly in her chest. She reached out and touched the surface of the piano with gentle fingertips. It felt smooth and familiar. She sat down. No one was watching. No one was expecting anything. For a long moment, she didn't move her hands. She simply breathed. Then, slowly, she placed her fingers on the keys. She pressed one note. Soft, clear, warm. A feeling washed over her, something deep, something she had pushed down for years. It felt like opening a door she had locked tightly. She played another note, and another. Her hands began forming a melody different from the one she played the night before. This one was slower, more emotional, almost trembling. It was a melody she had created years ago, during a difficult time, and she had never played it again since. But now, alone in the quiet mansion, it felt right. Her fingers moved gently, the music growing fuller, richer, as though telling a story she didn't have the words to express. Unknowingly, someone watched her from the hallway. Mr. Grant. He had been passing by when he heard the first few notes, but he didn't interrupt. He simply stood there, listening quietly from a distance, his expression softening with each note. Elena played until her emotions settled, until her heart felt lighter. When the final note faded, she placed her hands in her lap and closed her eyes. She didn't notice Mr. Grant had silently walked away, giving her privacy. She stood from the piano with a calm breath, feeling both vulnerable and alive. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. And though she didn't know it yet, this moment, this quiet return to music was only the beginning of a much bigger change. The news about the housemaid's hidden talent spread through the mansion faster than anyone expected. By the next morning, every worker seemed to move a little differently. Some acted curious, some kept stealing glances at her, and others whispered among themselves. She tried not to notice, but it was impossible to ignore the sudden attention. It felt strange, almost unreal, that one simple moment at the piano could change so much. She woke earlier than usual, hoping to avoid the busy kitchen. She thought she could quietly start her morning tasks before the others arrived. But when she walked in, she saw two of the other maids already there. They stopped talking the moment she stepped inside. One of them gave a warm smile, but the other looked at her with wide eyes, as if seeing someone completely different. She forced a smile back and went straight to the counter to begin preparing the tea tray. For the millionaire, her hands felt heavier today, not because she was tired, but because she knew people were watching her now. She felt like every move she made was being judged, even though she had never asked for any of this. She only wanted to do her work, stay out of trouble, and send money home to her family. But life sometimes changes direction without asking. When she walked toward the dining room with the tray, she noticed the tall man who worked as the security chief standing near the hallway. He watched her with a thoughtful look, almost like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. She gave him a small nod and continued on. The millionaire was already seated at the long table, reading the morning newspaper. He didn't look up when she entered. She placed the tray gently on the side table and poured his tea carefully, making sure the cup didn't clink against the saucer. She had done this many times before, but today felt different. He finally lowered the newspaper and spoke. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. She almost dropped the spoon. He had never asked her anything like that before. "Yes, sir," she said softly. He nodded, not smiling but not cold either. "Good." He picked up his tea and took a sip. She waited for him to dismiss her, but he didn't. Instead, he observed her with the same curious expression he had the night before, when he discovered her talent. "You play the piano with confidence," he said, "almost as if the music belongs to you." She looked down at her hands, unsure how to respond. "I learned a long time ago," she said quietly. "I didn't think it still mattered." "It matters," he said simply. She wasn't sure what he meant, and she didn't dare ask. He waved his hand gently, letting her know she could leave. She bowed slightly and walked out of the room, her heartbeat a little faster than normal. As she returned to the hallway, she found the other workers gathered near the stairs. Most of them pretended to be busy as she passed, but one of the younger maids hurried toward her with excitement. "Is it true you played for the owner last night?" she asked. She nodded, trying to keep her voice calm. "It was nothing. He only asked me to try." "Nothing?" "Everyone heard about it," the maid said. "They say he didn't take his eyes off you once." She didn't know what to say to that. She only offered a small smile and continued walking, leaving the whispers behind her. The rest of the morning went on almost normally, except for the small moments when people would stop talking as she approached. She kept her head down and focused on her work, dusting, sweeping, folding linens, organizing the storage room, all the tasks she had always done. But something inside her felt like it was shifting. Every time she saw the piano room while passing through the hallway, she felt a pull. She didn't dare step inside again unless she was asked, but her mind kept replaying the memory of touching the keys, feeling the familiar rhythm come back to her, hearing the soft echo of the notes in that huge room. Later in the afternoon, while she was polishing the glass doors near the courtyard, one of the senior staff members approached her. He was usually strict and rarely smiled, but today he seemed more thoughtful. "The owner will be expecting you later," he said. She straightened with surprise. "Expecting me?" He nodded. "He asked that you come to the piano room once you finish your shift." Her heart jumped again, this time louder. She wasn't sure if she should feel nervous or excited. She thanked him quietly and returned to her task with shaky hands, wiping the glass more slowly than usual. When her shift finally ended, she stood in front of the piano room door, unsure whether she should knock first or simply walk in. She pressed her hands together, took a slow breath, and gently opened the door. The millionaire stood beside the piano, not sitting this time. He looked calm, almost relaxed, as if he had been waiting for her. "Come in," he said. She stepped inside and closed the door quietly. "I want to understand something," he began. "How did someone like you learn to play the piano at such a level? Your training must have been serious." She lowered her eyes. "My mother taught me when I was young. She was a piano teacher. We didn't have much, but she saved money for my lessons. She believed I would have a future in music." "And did you?" he asked. She gave a small, sad smile. "Life took another path. I had responsibilities. I needed to work. The music had to wait." He walked around the piano slowly, thinking. "Would you play again today?" he asked. She hesitated. "If you want me to, sir." "I do," he said. She moved toward the piano, her steps slow but steady. She sat down gently, feeling a familiar calm wrap around her. Even though she was nervous, the piano always made her feel safe. It was the one place where her heart felt free. "Play something you love," the millionaire said. She placed her fingers on the keys and closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered a piece her mother used to hum while cooking, soft, warm, and full of comfort. She let her hands move gently, letting each note rise and settle in the air. The room filled with a peaceful melody, one that carried memories, hopes, and quiet dreams. She didn't try to play perfectly. She played honestly, with feeling, with the same sincerity she had always carried. When she finished, she looked up slowly. The millionaire wasn't expressionless this time. Something in his eyes looked softened, almost touched. "You play with heart," he said. "Not just skill." "That's rare." She bowed her head. "Thank you, sir." He took a step closer. "I want to give you an opportunity, something different from cleaning floors and carrying trays, something that suits your talent." She stared at him, unsure if she understood correctly. "An opportunity for music?" she asked. "Yes," he said, "but it depends on whether you want it." Her breath caught in her chest. She felt a mix of disbelief, hope, and fear. She never imagined someone would offer her such a chance, especially not someone like him. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to decide now," he said, "but think about it." He walked toward the door and opened it. "You may go for today," he added. She stood up slowly, her legs trembling. She gave him a respectful nod and left the room, closing the door behind her. As she walked back to the workers' quarters, her mind was spinning. She had come to this mansion simply looking for work, just enough to support her family. She never expected music to return to her life in such a powerful way. But now, everything was changing. She lay in her small room that night, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Her heart was full of questions. Could she really step into a new world? Did she deserve such a chance? And what would people think? Most importantly, what would her family say? But beneath all the worries, there was something else, the quiet excitement she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, she felt the possibility of a future she once believed was gone forever. And she didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But she knew one thing clearly: music was calling her back. The next morning arrived with a quiet tension in the air. She woke up long before her alarm rang, lying still on her small bed as early sunlight filtered through the thin curtain. Her thoughts from the night before returned like gentle waves. The millionaire's offer, the soft glow in his eyes as he listened to her play, and the way her own heart had lifted as the music filled the room. She sat up slowly, brushing a hand through her hair. She was used to waking with a clear list of tasks for the day: sweep the hall, dust the shelves, polish the floors. But today felt different. The mansion seemed to hold its breath, waiting. She dressed quietly and stepped out into the main hallway. Everything looked the same: the long carpets, the framed paintings, the polished wooden railings. But she felt as if she were seeing it all from a different angle, as if she were no longer just part of the background dot in the kitchen. The other workers were already preparing breakfast. Some greeted her with soft smiles, some with curious eyes. She tried to act normal, picking up the tray she always used for morning service. But inside, her stomach fluttered nervously. The senior staff member approached her once again. "The owner wishes to speak with you after breakfast," he said. She froze for a short moment, then nodded. "Yes, sir." She carried the breakfast tray to the dining room, her footsteps gentle but shaky. When she entered, the millionaire was already seated, reading another stack of papers. He looked up briefly as she placed the tray before him. "Thank you," he said. She bowed her head. "Your tea, sir." He watched her for a moment, not with coldness, but with a thoughtful silence. She felt her face warm under his gaze. She finished her task quickly and stepped back toward the door. "Come to the music room when you're done," he said. Her breath caught again. "Yes, sir." When she returned to the hallway, she pressed a hand against her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. She didn't know what he would say. Would he offer her a chance to learn again? Would he ask her to perform something bigger? Or was this something else entirely? After finishing the rest of her morning duties, she made her way to the music room. The door was partly open. She knocked gently. "Come in," his voice called. She stepped inside. The millionaire stood near the piano, his hands resting lightly on the polished surface. He looked calmer than usual, almost peaceful. "I've been thinking," he said. She waited quietly. "You have talent, natural, emotional, and sincere. Not everyone plays like that. Most focus only on technique. But you play with meaning." She lowered her eyes, embarrassed. "Music was always a part of my childhood. It reminds me of home, of the people I love." He nodded slowly, as if her words confirmed something he already suspected. "I want to support your talent," he said. "Not as charity, not as a favor, but because you deserve a chance to grow." She looked up, unsure if she heard him correctly. "Support? How, sir? He walked toward a table and picked up a thin folder. He handed it to her. Inside were papers, details of a local music academy, schedules, beginner to advanced courses, even scholarship information. I've spoken with someone I know at the academy, he said. You can start training again, properly. They will evaluate your level and guide you. Her eyes widened. She felt the words sink in slowly, like warm sunlight. But, sir, I work here. I can't just leave my duties. He gave a soft, understanding nod. You don't have to. I will adjust your hours. Your work will still be important, but you won't lose this opportunity because of it. His voice grew gentler. You've spent too long putting your dreams aside. It's time you take something back for yourself. Her vision blurred slightly as tears filled her eyes. She blinked quickly and looked down, feeling overwhelmed by gratitude. Thank you, sir, she whispered. I don't know how to repay something like this. You don't need to repay anything, he said. Use your gift. That's enough. She held the folder close to her chest, feeling disbelief, joy, and fear all mixed together. You may begin as early as next week, he added. Her voice trembled. I will do my best, sir. A quiet smile touched his lips. I know. For a moment, the room felt peaceful, almost warm. She stood there, unable to move, afraid the moment would disappear if she breathed too deeply. He cleared his throat gently and stepped aside. Would you play something today? Something hopeful, she nodded, wiping her eyes quickly. She sat at the piano again. Her fingers rested on the keys. She closed her eyes and remembered all the hardships, all the small victories, all the moments she thought music was gone forever. And then she began to play. The melody she chose was soft at first, then brighter, carrying quiet strength. It felt like a promise to herself, to her past, and to the chance she had been given. The millionaire listened without moving. The sunlight from the tall windows fell gently on the piano, turning the moment into something unforgettable. When she finished, the room stayed silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. One day, he said, I hope the world hears you play like this. Her heart fluttered at the thought. She didn't know if she would ever become someone important. She didn't know if she would perform on big stages or play for large crowds. But for the first time in years, she believed she could try. She stood slowly, bowing her head. Thank you, sir, truly. Her voice carried sincerity and quiet determination. He nodded and dismissed her gently. She walked out of the music room on shaky legs, but her heart felt lighter than ever. The hallway looked brighter. The air felt warmer. Every step she took seemed to echo with new purpose. When she reached her small room later, she placed the folder safely on her bed and sat beside it. She opened it again, running her fingers over the pages. A part of her still couldn't believe any of this was real. She thought of her mother, her sacrifices, the dream she once held tightly. She pictured her family smiling. She imagined telling them that she had been given a chance, a real chance, to pursue the music she once loved. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream again. Days passed, and the preparations began. She informed her family, who responded with joy and disbelief. The other workers in the mansion slowly got used to the idea, and many began to encourage her quietly. The millionaire gave her space, not interfering, but always observing with a calm assurance. He never pressured her, never demanded anything in return. He seemed content simply knowing he was helping someone rediscover her gift. When the day finally arrived for her first evaluation at the academy, she stood at the gate wearing simple clothes, holding her folder close to her chest. Her hands trembled slightly, but her heart beat with brave rhythm. She looked up at the building, tall, beautiful, full of possibilities. She closed her eyes briefly and took a steady breath. I can do this, she whispered to herself, and then she stepped forward. What happened inside would become the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with lessons, challenges, small victories, and new people who would see her not as a housemaid but as a musician. Back at the mansion, the millionaire stood near the window of the music room, hands behind his back, watching the long driveway where she had walked earlier. A small, thoughtful smile touched his face. He knew she would surprise many people, perhaps even herself. As for her, she didn't know where this journey would lead. She didn't know if she would one day play on a stage or teach others or simply play at home for her family. But she knew one thing with certainty. Her music was no longer silent. It had found its way back into her life, and this time, she wasn't going to let it fade again. Whatever the future held, she was ready, and the mansion, once filled only with the sound of her footsteps and quiet work, would one day echo again with her music, not by command, but by choice.